I think this week of Days of Our Lives, May 11th to 15th, is shaping up to be one of those classic Salem slow burn explosions, where everything looks like a formal gathering on the surface, but underneath, chaos is just waiting to erupt. The DiMera will: order or total chaos. It all starts with Stefano DiMera's will reading, which I was expecting to be dramatic, but maybe not this layered. With E.J. DiMera already hinting at surprises, I get the feeling this isn't just about inheritance, it's about control from beyond the grave. What really caught my attention is Theo Carver being named executor. I didn't see that coming at all. To me, that suggests Stefano had a very specific reason, something personal, maybe even emotional, which isn't usually his style unless there's a deeper manipulation at play. That mysterious sealed letter Theo mentioned, I was wondering if it might completely reframe everything we think we know about Stefano's final wishes. And then there's Marlena Evans being named a beneficiary. I mean, that instantly raises eyebrows. I might be wrong, but the long-rumored idea that Marlena and Stefano share some hidden past, possibly even a child, feels like it could finally get real traction here. Even a hint toward that would shake Salem to its core. Gabby, Stefan, and a brewing power grab. On another front, Gabby Hernandez stepping up to claim Stefan DiMera's inheritance could add fuel to an already raging fire. If she actually proves the divorce forgery, that's not just a legal win, that's a full-on DiMera power shift. But honestly, I don't think that's even the biggest twist coming. This show loves to stack shocks, and this feels like just one layer. A possible resurrection? Now here's where things get wild, even for Salem. The idea that Lexi Carver could wake up and walk out of a secret passageway? I didn't realize how much I missed that kind of over-the-top DiMera twist until now. If Abe Carver comes face-to-face with Lexi alive, that's not just shocking, it's emotional dynamite. And honestly, it fits the tone of a Stefano-centered storyline. Death has never been very permanent in his world. Chanel's health crisis. Meanwhile, things take a much more grounded and serious turn with Chanel Dupree DiMera. I was really hoping for a false alarm, but it sounds like her biopsy may confirm the worst. Her leaning on Johnny DiMera feels like a natural emotional anchor. To me, this could be one of those storylines where the show slows down and really lets the characters breathe, especially if it explores fear, resilience, and relationships under pressure. Young love and trouble. Across town, Ariana Horton growing closer to Liam Saleko seems innocent on the surface, but in Salem, nothing stays simple. Their first kiss might be sweet, but with Gabby already against it, I feel like this is setting up conflict rather than romance. Kristen, Xander, and more chaos. And then there's Xander Kyriakis getting pulled into Kristen DiMera's orbit. That combination alone tells me trouble is guaranteed. Both characters thrive in messy situations, so whatever they're cooking up probably won't end well for anyone else. Amy's revenge plot. Finally, I think Amy Choi might be heading into dangerous territory. Her determination to make people pay, especially targeting Holly Jonas over Sophia Choi's issues, feels like it could spiral fast. Cyberbullying accusations? Legal trouble? I was wondering if this might turn into a cautionary storyline about how far revenge can go before it backfires. Final thoughts. To me, this week feels like a perfect mix of classic Days elements. Shocking returns, secret legacies, emotional struggles, and just enough chaos to keep everything unpredictable. I might be wrong, but it really seems like the DiMera will reading is just the trigger, and everything else is about to explode from there. I think this whole sequence plays like one of those classic, slow burn, Days-style emotional storms. Everything feels calm on the surface, but underneath it's all quietly unraveling. At Stephanie and Alex's place, I was immediately struck by how off balance she seems. Waking up disoriented and casually pulling a gun out of a living room drawer? That didn't feel like random staging to me. It felt like a warning. Maybe I'm wrong, but in soap language, a misplaced gun is never just a prop. It's a ticking clock. I kept wondering, is this about protection, paranoia, or setting up a future accident that changes everything? Then Alex gets the paternity confirmation, and oddly, it lands without shock. Almost like the characters, and honestly, even I, had already accepted it before the test said it out loud. What mattered more to me was the timing. Because right when that truth settles in, Julie walks in carrying another emotional weight. Jeremy leaving. Stephanie asking Alex to leave so she can talk to Julie alone felt very intentional. It's like she needed space to confront the reality she's been avoiding. And when she lays out Jeremy's manipulation, the whole Joy and the baby return scheme, I found myself torn. I didn't agree with Jeremy's methods at all, but I couldn't ignore that his actions forced the truth into the open. Julie's perspective really grounded the scene for me. I was thinking how she didn't excuse Jeremy, but she reframed the chaos in a way only someone with her history could. Her story about losing a man to her best friend because of a pregnancy, it mirrored Stephanie's situation almost too perfectly. But instead of making it tragic, Julie turned it into something hopeful. That idea that love is tested, not destroyed, by timing. I think that's what Stephanie needed to hear, even if she's not ready to believe it yet. Meanwhile, Joy at the Salem Inn felt quietly heartbreaking. A crying baby in a strange place, a mother trying to reassure her while clearly unsure herself. It made everything feel more real. When Jeremy calls to say he's leaving for New York, I didn't get a sense of resolution. If anything, it felt like abandonment wrapped in practicality. Then Alex running into Joy at the Brady pub. This is where things really start to shift. I noticed how careful he was. He doesn't pressure her to stay, but at the same time, he clearly wants her to. That balance felt genuine to me. And when Joy admits she doesn't really have a life to go back to in New York, I couldn't help but feel like Salem is becoming less of a choice and more of a necessity for her. Her question about Stephanie hung in the air for me. Because Alex says Stephanie understands, but does she really? Or is that what he needs to believe right now? I feel like that assumption could come back to haunt them. And then there's the Kyriakis estate, which almost feels like a parallel story about control versus understanding. Gabby's instinct to protect Ari by shutting Liam out, it's understandable, but also kind of short-sighted. Philip calling that out surprised me in a good way. I didn't expect him to be the voice of reason, but he actually brought a lot of emotional intelligence into that conversation. What really stayed with me, though, was Philip opening up about Tyler. That didn't feel like just backstory. It felt like a piece of him he's been carrying quietly for years. I was thinking how he's not a father in the traditional sense, but the emotional connection is still there. That idea, that parenthood isn't just about presence, but about care and curiosity, adds an interesting contrast to Alex suddenly stepping into fatherhood in real time. Gabby apologizing felt sincere, but Philip admitting she did hurt him added weight. It made the moment feel earned rather than neatly resolved. Overall, I feel like this episode is less about big dramatic explosions and more about emotional groundwork. Guns in drawers, children returning, secrets resurfacing. It all feels like setup. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like everything is aligning for a situation where love, trust, and timing are going to collide in a much bigger way very soon. I think this episode really leans into the idea that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes, and that's where things start to unravel in a painful way. Philip admitting he's making things about himself felt surprisingly self-aware. I was actually thinking he might double down, but instead he acknowledges that Ari has every right to worry. Still, he pushes the point that forbidding Ari from seeing Hank will only backfire. And honestly, he's not wrong. To me, that moment shows how sometimes the more control you try to exert, the more you lose it. Even Gabby recognizing that felt like a quiet shift. Meanwhile, over at Horton Square, everything spirals into something much heavier. Tate, Ari, and Holly searching all night already sets this tone of dread, and when Tate relays that Sophia may have jumped into the river, I didn't realize how quickly the situation would escalate into something this final. The backpack, the blood, it all feels chillingly real. Tate breaking down was one of the most human moments in the episode. I was wondering if he'd try to stay strong, but instead he just collapses under the guilt. From his perspective, he was trying to do the right thing, but it backfired in the worst way. And that's the tragedy. He thought honesty and kindness would prevent harm, not cause it. Holly comforting him adds a softness, but it doesn't erase that weight he's carrying. The dialogue around how to talk about suicide stood out to me too. Ari correcting the phrasing to "died by suicide" felt intentional, like the show is trying to reflect a more modern, compassionate understanding. It's a small detail, but it changes the tone. It removes judgment and centers the pain instead. Then everything shifts again with Amy at the police station. Her grief feels raw, almost suffocating. I think what hit hardest is that she's stuck between hope and reality. Jada saying there's still a chance, but also making it clear the odds are slim. That kind of uncertainty can be more devastating than closure. And when Amy shows up at Horton Square, that confrontation was brutal. I was thinking it might be emotional, but it went straight into blame. Hearing Sophia's suicide note being read aloud, with Holly and Ari directly named, turns grief into something explosive. From Amy's perspective, this isn't just loss, it's injustice. To me, the show is walking a very thin line here. On one hand, it's highlighting how bullying, especially online, can deeply affect someone. On the other, it raises the question, is it fair to place that entire weight on Holly and Ari? Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels more complicated than Amy allows. Pain looks for a target, and right now, they're it. The final moment, with Amy vowing legal consequences, shifts the story into something even bigger. This isn't just about grief anymore. It's about accountability, perception, and possibly public fallout. And in contrast, the quieter moments, Alex and Stephanie, Joy's happiness, Gabby and Philip's intimacy, almost feel like another world entirely. It's interesting how the show balances everyday life continuing while something devastating unfolds at the center. Overall, I think this episode is less about what happened and more about how everyone processes it. Guilt, blame, denial, love, they're all colliding at once. And I have a feeling this is only the beginning of the fallout, not the end. I think the return of Joy and baby Kelsey on Days of Our Lives completely flips Alex and Stephanie's world upside down. And from what I'm seeing in the May 7th episode previews, things only get more intense from here. I was actually a little surprised at how quickly Alex steps into full, proud dad mode. The moment he's certain Kelsey is his daughter, he doesn't hesitate. He heads straight to the Kiriakis mansion to tell Justin. And honestly, that father-son scene feels like one of the warmer moments in all this chaos. Justin's reaction, pure joy, that big protective hug, it really shows how much this unexpected news means to him too. But then there's this other layer I can't ignore. Alex also has a serious conversation with Gabby during that same visit, and I keep wondering what's really going on there. It doesn't look casual at all. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it feels like something bigger is brewing beneath the surface. At the same time, Alex tries to reassure Stephanie that everything will be fine. There's this tender moment between them in Horton Town Square, and I didn't realize how complicated this would feel. He's genuinely happy, but also trying to hold his marriage together. That balance doesn't look easy, and I'm not convinced it's going to hold. Meanwhile, Joy is out introducing baby Kelsey to Salem, and I think those scenes are doing a lot of quiet storytelling. Her run-in with Chanel outside Sweet Bits seems polite on the surface, but knowing the show, there's always tension underneath. And then at the Brady pub, Kate absolutely melts over the baby, which, honestly, is one of the lighter, sweeter beats in the episode. But things shift the moment Stephanie walks in. That confrontation between Stephanie and Joy? Yeah, that doesn't look like it's going to end well. Even though Stephanie has a soft moment looking at Kelsey, the tension between the two women is undeniable. And I keep thinking, Stephanie knows Jeremy played a role in bringing Joy back. That's not something you just brush off. To me, this feels less like a simple rivalry and more like the start of a deeper emotional conflict. Then there's Stephanie turning to Jada. I actually like this direction. It grounds everything a bit. Their conversation looks serious but also supportive, like Stephanie is trying to process everything without completely falling apart. It's one of those quieter storylines that might end up being really important. On the Gabby side, her scene with Ari looks tense too. I'm wondering if this ties back to Liam, but it could just as easily involve Amy. Either way, Ari seems caught in the middle of something messy, and Gabby doesn't look like she's holding back. And Amy, honestly, her storyline feels the most unstable right now. She's clearly not thinking straight after losing Sophia. The way she's wandering around Salem, confronting people, it's unsettling. When she shows up in Johnny's hospital room and startles him, that moment really stands out. It feels like the beginning of something that could spiral fast. Johnny, of course, is dealing with everything at once: his recovery, Sophia's death, and Chanel's cancer diagnosis. His scenes with Chanel look emotional and heavy, like they're both just trying to survive everything hitting them at once. And then there's Roman and Kate. Their conversation about Johnny adds another layer, especially since Johnny is convinced Kate betrayed him with Bonnie's book. And honestly, he's not wrong. What I find interesting is that Roman seems to be starting to believe him. That shift could have real consequences for Kate moving forward. Overall, I think this episode is setting up multiple emotional collisions at once. The baby storyline might look like a moment of joy on the surface, but to me, it's already unraveling relationships in ways that won't be easy to fix. I think Joy's explanation actually makes emotional sense, even if the logic is a little shaky, which to me is exactly what makes it feel like classic Days of Our Lives storytelling. If I look at it from Joy's perspective, I can see why she thought she was doing the right thing at the time. She saw Alex Kyriakis' reaction to the pregnancy scare, and honestly, it seems like that moment stuck with her more than anything else. I was thinking, if someone looks visibly relieved at the idea of not becoming a parent, it's not hard to imagine why Joy would hesitate to bring a real pregnancy into that situation. To her, it probably felt like protecting both Alex and the baby. At the same time, I don't fully buy that keeping the truth hidden was the best move. I mean, saying you didn't want to blow up Alex and Stephanie Johnson's relationship sounds noble, but I feel like that decision kind of took away Alex's right to choose for himself. And in soap logic, secrets like that don't protect relationships, they just delay the explosion. What I found interesting is how firmly Joy stands by the paternity. She sounded almost defensive about it, pointing out how easy it is to prove with a test. But maybe I'm wrong. It's Salem. When has a paternity test ever just been straightforward? The fans joking about switched results aren't reaching. If anything, the show almost invites that suspicion. Her timing is also convenient. I was wondering if her return is really just about Kelsey, or if hearing that Alex wanted a family triggered something deeper. Because that's a big shift, going from "I'll stay away so he can be happy" to "he deserves to know his child." Both can't fully exist without some internal conflict. And honestly, I kind of like that she admits co-parenting will be messy. That part felt real. It's not framed as some ideal situation, more like, this is complicated, and we'll figure it out. That uncertainty gives the story more weight, instead of tying it up too neatly. As for the bigger picture, I think this storyline is less about whether Joy was right or wrong, and more about consequences catching up. Now you've got Alex stuck between the life he was building and the one he didn't know he already had. Stephanie forced to question everything, and Joy trying to justify a decision that can't be undone. To me, the real question isn't whether Joy had reasons. It's whether those reasons will matter once the fallout really hits. I think this episode really leans into that classic Days of Our Lives emotional contrast, where one person is embracing a life change while another is quietly unraveling because of it. With Alex Kyriakis, I was actually a little surprised at how quickly he's stepping into fatherhood mode. He didn't hesitate. He pushed Joy Wesley to move to Salem, and now he's going straight to Justin Kyriakis for advice. To me, that says he's not just reacting emotionally, he's trying to do this right. But I was wondering, is he underestimating how complicated this setup really is? Justin's experience definitely makes him the right person to ask, especially when love and family don't line up neatly. At the same time, Stephanie Johnson is clearly not on the same page at all. I didn't realize how deeply Julie Williams' story would hit her, but it makes sense. It basically mirrors her worst fear. When she vents to Jada Hunter, it feels less like complaining and more like panic. Becoming a stepmother overnight wasn't part of her plan, and I think she's starting to see this as losing Alex rather than building something new. Then there's the emotional gut punch with Chanel Dupree and Johnny DiMera. I was honestly expecting Johnny to spiral, but maybe I was wrong. He actually steps up. That moment where he supports Chanel instead of centering himself feels like real growth. And with Sarah Horton possibly facing cancer while pregnant, that storyline could go in such a heavy direction. It's one of those plots where every decision has consequences. On the other side, Gabby Hernandez stepping in with Ariana Horton feels very on brand. I mean, I was thinking the same thing. Gabby, of all people, giving romantic advice? That irony is hard to ignore. And yet, she's not wrong to be concerned about Liam. The problem is, teens don't listen, they react. So this could easily push Ari further toward him instead of away. Finally, the tension between Kate Roberts and Roman Brady feels like it's building towards something bigger. Kate keeps denying involvement in Johnny's business mess, but Roman clearly isn't convinced. I get the feeling he's not just looking for the truth, he wants leverage. And when Roman starts asking for favors, that usually means things are about to get messy. Overall, I think this episode is setting up multiple emotional collisions at once. Parenthood, trust, illness, and control, all about to intersect in very Days-style drama. I think Days of Our Lives is really leaning into its latest baby boom storyline, and honestly, it feels like one of those classic Salem chain reactions, where one revelation sets off 5 more emotional landmines. I was struck by how everything seems to orbit around Joy and her baby right now. Now that Alex knows for certain he's the father, it pushes him into a whole new phase of life overnight. Telling Justin feels like more than just sharing news. It's almost a generational shift. Justin going from father to grandfather again, especially thinking about Ariana already being college-aged, really highlights how fast time moves in Salem. I didn't realize how much emotional weight that could carry until moments like this. At the same time, Stephanie's situation feels a lot messier. I was wondering how long she could hold it together after everything with Jeremy and Owen. And now this, her husband having a child with another woman, just completely upends any sense of stability she was trying to rebuild. When she opens up to Jada, it feels like she's finally admitting that things aren't as handled as she wanted to believe. Then there's that inevitable Brady pub encounter. Of course Stephanie meets Joy there. It's Salem after all. Meeting her stepdaughter face to face adds a whole new emotional layer. To me, the most interesting part is whether seeing the baby might stir something in Stephanie. Maybe she didn't think she wanted children before, but now, I think that could shift in a big way. Joy, meanwhile, seems to be everywhere, and not always in a good way. Her run-in with Chanel and Trey feels almost tense beneath the surface. They can admire each other's babies all they want, but the history between Joy and Chanel isn't exactly forgotten. I think the show is deliberately keeping that discomfort alive, like a ticking clock for future conflict. And then the tone shifts hard with Chanel and Johnny. The hospital scenes feel heavier, more grounded. When Chanel learns she may be dealing with something as serious as cancer, especially while pregnant, it changes everything. I didn't realize how quickly the storyline would pivot from interpersonal drama to something so deeply personal and life-altering. What stands out to me is that this isn't being framed as hopeless. The limitations on treatment add tension, but it's not being written as a death sentence. Instead, it feels like the beginning of a long, complicated journey for Chanel and Johnny, one that could end up being one of the show's more emotionally resonant arcs if handled right. Overall, I think this episode is doing a lot at once: family, betrayal, new beginnings, and serious health stakes. And somehow it all ties back to the same theme: how one new life can completely reshape everyone else's. I think Wednesday's episode of Days of Our Lives is shaping up to be one of those emotionally packed, slightly chaotic chapters where everything starts colliding at once. I was especially struck by what's coming for Kristen DiMera. It feels like the walls are finally closing in on her. EJ DiMera catching on to her misstep with Sophia Choi didn't surprise me. I kind of suspected that moment would come back to haunt her. Kristen trying to deny involvement feels very on brand, but to me, this looks less like denial and more like the beginning of a strategic alliance. I'm wondering if EJ's own secrets, especially whatever he's cooking up with Dr. Wilhelm Rolf, will force them into some kind of uneasy pact. It's that classic DiMera dynamic: mutual destruction or mutual protection. Then there's Johnny DiMera, and honestly, I didn't realize how much pressure one character could carry at once. Surviving an explosion orchestrated by Sophia is already extreme, but adding Chanel Dupree DiMera's pregnancy and possible breast cancer diagnosis, it's overwhelming even to watch. I think bringing in Marlena Evans for guidance makes perfect sense. Marlena always steps in when things go from dramatic to deeply human. I was also wondering how long it would take before Chad DiMera and Kat Green crossed paths again. Salem isn't exactly a city where people can avoid each other forever. They'll probably try to act normal, but let's be real. This show doesn't do casual when there's unresolved chemistry involved. To me, this feels like the beginning of something they won't be able to ignore much longer. The situation with Theo Carver hit a different emotional note. His conflict over Lexi Carver's resurrection feels grounded in something deeper. Of course he wants his mother back, but there's that lingering fear. What if she comes back changed? And knowing EJ is behind the science experiment, I can't help but think this won't end cleanly. Maybe I'm wrong, but playing Frankenstein in Salem usually comes with consequences. And then there's the fallout between Roman Brady and Kate Roberts Brady. I always felt like Kate softens around Roman, so seeing her slip back into her more manipulative corporate instincts creates this tension that feels very real. Roman telling her to keep her distance, it didn't feel like a throwaway argument to me. It felt final, or at least like the beginning of something breaking. Overall, I feel like this episode is less about single plot twists and more about pressure building everywhere at once. Relationships, secrets, and moral lines all getting pushed. And in Salem, that usually means something big is about to explode next. I think the May 6th episode of Days of Our Lives is shaping up to be one of those emotionally tangled days where everyone is either issuing warnings or quietly falling into trouble. I was really struck by the tension between Roman Brady and Kate Roberts Brady. Roman telling Kate to keep her distance feels less like a simple warning and more like a relationship on the brink. To me, his anger makes total sense. What she did involving Johnny DiMera and that whole publishing scheme with Bonnie Kyriakis wasn't just business, it was personal. I'm starting to wonder if this is where their romance really starts to fall apart. At the same time, E.J. DiMera going after Kristen DiMera adds another layer of family tension. I feel like E.J. isn't wrong to be suspicious about what happened to Sophia, Choi, and Johnny, but if he actually finds proof, this could explode into a full-blown DiMera war. And honestly, that never ends quietly. Then there's Theo Carver, and I didn't expect his situation to feel this heavy. On one hand, finding out Lexi Carver is alive should be a miracle, but the fact that he's hiding it from Abe Carver makes everything messy. I can't help thinking about Paulina Price, too. Theo clearly cares about her, and this secret could completely destroy Abe's marriage. It's the kind of dilemma where no matter what he does, someone gets hurt. I also feel for Johnny right now. Between the trauma involving Sophia and Chanel DiMera dealing with a cancer scare, it's a lot for anyone to handle. I think having Marlena Evans step in is exactly what he needs. If anyone can help him process everything, it's Marlena. But even then, healing won't come quickly. And then there's the complicated situation with Kat Green and Chad DiMera. I was wondering if they could really keep things casual, because the chemistry is clearly still there. But with Thomas DiMera already against it, the stakes feel unusually high. Chad isn't just risking heartbreak, he could lose his kids. What makes it even more complicated, in my opinion, is Kat's growing connection to EJ while secretly investigating him. That's the kind of emotional triangle that never stays controlled for long. I wouldn't be surprised if one impulsive moment changes everything, especially if the wrong person sees it. Overall, I feel like this episode is less about big shocking twists and more about pressure building in every corner. And in Salem, that kind of pressure always leads to something explosive. I think after watching the May 6th, 2026 episode of Days of Our Lives, it really hit me just how far gone Kristen DiMera is right now. I was honestly expecting at least a hint of guilt after what she did to Sophia, something to suggest she understood the weight of attacking a vulnerable teenager and leaving her for dead. But instead, what I saw felt even more unsettling. When Sophia showed up in Kristen's imagination, soaked, injured, and very much alive, I thought maybe this was Kristen's conscience catching up with her. I was wondering if this would be the moment where her guilt finally surfaced. But it didn't play out that way at all. To me, it felt like the scene revealed the opposite. Kristen wasn't remorseful, she was frustrated. Dream Kristen wasn't haunted by what she'd done. She was annoyed that Sophia hadn't followed through with the plan to kill Johnny DiMera. That really stood out to me. Instead of regret, there was disappointment that things didn't go her way. Even when Sophia, clearly desperate, begged for help to start over, Kristen's reaction was cold and threatening. Then E.J. DiMera waking her up almost felt symbolic, like pulling her out of a warped mindset. But honestly, I don't think it changed anything. If anything, it confirmed to me that Kristen's biggest concern now is damage control. She seems more focused on protecting herself and plotting her next move than reflecting on what she's done. I didn't realize how much I had started to believe in her growth until now. There was a time when she was willing to sacrifice herself, going to prison for her child, and I thought that meant something lasting. But maybe I was wrong. It feels like that version of Kristen didn't stick, and now she's fully reverted back to being unpredictable and ruthless. At this point, I'm not even sure I find her entertaining anymore. It's starting to feel exhausting rather than compelling. The one small relief, at least to me, is that she's not tangled up with Brady Black again. That dynamic ran its course a long time ago. Still, knowing this show, I can't say I'd be surprised if it somehow resurfaces. I think what stands out most in this upcoming turn of events in Days of Our Lives for Wednesday, May 7th, 2026, is how almost every storyline is built around truth finally refusing to stay buried, even when the characters are not ready for it. To me, the tension between Gabby Hernandez and her daughter, Ari Horton, feels especially personal this time. I was wondering how long it would take before their opposing instincts would collide, and now it seems unavoidable. Gabby is operating from a place of deep distrust toward Liam, convinced that his past actions and hidden connections to Ari make him a real danger. But Ari, on the other hand, isn't reacting with fear. She's drawn in. She wants proximity, curiosity, and connection, even if it goes against everything her mother is warning her about. To me, this isn't just a disagreement. It feels like a deeper generational split in how they define safety versus freedom. Then there is Alex Kyriakis, who feels like his entire future just shifted in a single moment. I didn't expect the paternity confirmation regarding Joy's baby to land with this much emotional weight, but it changes everything. What I find interesting is how quickly he shifts from shock to responsibility, as if reality forces him into fatherhood before he has time to emotionally process it. His recent elopement with Stephanie Johnson suddenly feels complicated in a way neither of them fully anticipated. And then there's Justin Kyriakis, who steps into this new family dynamic almost as a grounding force. I think I was expecting tension, but instead there's a quiet understanding forming between father and son as they process what it means to suddenly have another generation to care for. It's less dramatic on the surface, but emotionally loaded underneath. Meanwhile, Stephanie turns to her close friend Jada Hunter, and I feel like this is where the emotional fallout really settles in. I didn't realize how layered her reaction would be. This isn't just about betrayal or surprise. It's about recalibrating what she thought her life was becoming. Alex having a child with someone else while she is still trying to build a future with him creates a quiet but intense emotional fracture. Elsewhere in Salem, Roman Brady is reaching a breaking point. I was wondering when the pressure of secrets would finally spill over, and now he is directly confronting Kate Roberts for answers. There's a sense that patience has run out, and what remains is a demand for honesty that could permanently shift their relationship. I think this moment is less about the secret itself and more about what prolonged silence does to trust. At the same time, Johnny DiMera steps into an emotionally supportive role for Chanel Dupree. I didn't expect this pairing to feel so tender in the middle of all the chaos, but Chanel is clearly carrying heavy news from her doctor, and Johnny's presence becomes a stabilizing force rather than a complicating one. It's one of those quieter beats that reminds me Salem's drama isn't only about conflict. It's also about who shows up when everything else feels uncertain. Overall, this episode feels like a convergence point where trust, truth, and emotional responsibility collide across multiple families at once. And I think what makes it compelling is that no one is fully right or wrong. They are all just reacting to life changing faster than they can emotionally keep up with.